Hey, Louise here, and I am here to show you a Scraptastic, beautiful potato chip block. Oh my goodness, this is a gorgeous little quilt, and it's a baby size, toddler size. It's square, and I think you're going to love it. And check it out, potato chip block right there in the middle. From there, though, we take a few modifications that are going to make some changes you will love. Makes it easier, faster, quicker. Oh my goodness, this is such a great way to make a quilt. Now let's get started. I want to show you. Oh, but first I need to give a shout out to Neva. Bless her heart. She gave me some beautiful fabrics to work with. And just look at how beautiful those fabrics turned out together. I am so blessed to have a generous friend who not only took me out to lunch and then gave me 2 bins of fabric saying, Leah, I'm not going to be using these. Can you? And I'm like, oh, of course. And look at all these wonderful fabrics in here. And there's just, oh, look at those are some brights. And there's just all kinds of colors. And over here, there's charm squares and a little fat quarter bundle. Oh, plus some layer cakes. So yes, I have a lot going on, but right now I am focusing on scrappy strips. And they're going to be 2.5 inches, so you can use a jelly roll as well. I have here a beautiful bundle of fat quarters in these great colors that are going to work so well together. And I'm thinking what I'm going to do is cut them into strips, but I also have some of the 10-inch layer cake. Ooh, there's one. I missed that one. And I'm going to just sort of figure out a way to mix it all up. We're going with a potato chip block, of course. What's better to go scrappy than a potato chip block? But we are going to make some modifications. And that's what makes this so much fun. Oh my goodness. So colors. I have a lot. I have them in 10-inch and I have them in fat quarter. And oh, look at this. Look at how wonderful that goes in here. Oh, and this group. So this little bundle is gorgeous too. And look at how these colors work in. We've got, some of these teals, and look at double fat quarters. Oh my goodness. Now this will be a lot of fun because this brings in more of this sort of a reddish color. And I'm not going to go with a lot of the darks right now. That'll be great for fall. But it'll be fun to bring some of these in because look at all these colors. Oh my goodness. Okay, this is going to be wonderful. Ooh, and some gold. I love the gold because we have the golds here. Okay, all right. The browns we're going to save because that's going to make a beautiful quilt. Oh, and what's here? Look at this. Oh, this is fun. That's sort of, now, and look at, okay, now this is something that I noticed. Look at this. These have the same print, but the little flower, this is burgundy, and that's sort of a gold color. And look at, we also have it in a cream, and this is gold burgundy with a teal. All right, so I have got a lot to work with. I'm going to start cutting, and I'll show you where we're going with this. Well, check this out. I have 24 different fabrics, all fat quarters, and I layered them in the order from light to dark because I'm going to work with them that way, and I'll show you that afterwards. But what I did want to show you is how I cut this. And I laid the fat quarters, I pressed them all, I put the salvages over here, and this was my cutting line. So I made a nice straight line along my grid on the mat, and then I trimmed it off just to be sure. And of course, all my trimming goes in my little pile because I'm going to be wrapping some cords and making some really awesome stuff with rope. So stay tuned for that. It'll be coming. Okay, so here we are. We have the first row I cut was 10 inches. And with that, I made layer cakes, 10-inch squares. I cut the other 10-inch square into 4, so I have my charm squares, and then I had 1.5 inches left over once the selvage was removed. Ordinarily, I don't cut this many layer cakes. I don't use them a lot, but because I had all these wonderful colors in here, and all these just work so well with what's in this bundle, I thought this will be perfect. So we have more layer cake. So I'm going to set that aside because I'm not using it now. These are just some extra scraps, 1.5 by 10 inches, which I will find something to do with. These I'm just going to kind of stack this way for now and set those aside. So this is more than 2 charm packs. But what's great is I'm getting all of this cut at once. So when it's time for me to get down to the serious business of sewing, I have what I need here. This hardly looks like anything compared to all that. I sure hope I counted right. I don't remember if I needed this many strips or that, but we'll figure it out. This is my backup. This is the extra piece. So I cut off a 2.5-inch strip here, and this is going to be my first round of potato chip block. So this is 2.5, and I trimmed it down to 4.5 because this is 5 inches. This I have the full width, which was about 20 to 22 inches, depending on each fabric. And I cut one at 8 inches, and I just left this where the ends are uneven here as they are. If I need more, this is my backup. This is the extra piece. So I'm not going to use that right now. But it is 5 inches, so I can definitely use that for a lot of other things. If I cut strips, then I've got a double set. So this is really handy to have. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to start with our square. And I kind of want to keep the darker ones to the middle. And I have these, like I said, in color order, because that's how I'm going to sew my strips together. So what I'll do is I'll start in the middle and just put some fun pieces together. And I want it to vary. I want different kinds of prints, the modern versus what I call the grandmother florals. I love them, but that's just a really good name for them. And then we'll have one up here. Actually, they go this way, don't they? I tend to lay it out backwards. There we go. So we'll put this one here. Ooh, and we'll get some bright color there. Okay, so our center square. Then we put 2 sides on, and I need 2 above and 2 below. So I'm going to put this one up here. And let's see what else I have. I want to use, the gold would be pretty. I like the gold better down here. It kind of plays off that. I like that dark one with the peachy color, so we'll put some of that up there. And what do we want down here? Oh, let's get some green. We haven't put green in. But I don't want those 2 prints side by side, so I'm going to switch this around. Okay, this is my center block. And I'm going to put this together, and then I'm going to show you how we're going to do the rest, because it's a little different than what you might be expecting. But once we get this done and we start adding our other strips, you'll see why this is the Scrapstashtic quilt block. It is the best, scrappiest, fastest quilt block because we're taking a lot of shortcuts. It's going to be beautiful. We're not cutting back on design or color, just on how we put it together. I think you're going to love it. Don't you just love the beginning of a potato chip block and the way all the small pieces just work around? I think it's great. I love it. And it's such a wonderful way to start a quilt. Now, what I'm doing from this point on, though, is going to be very different. It's very scrappy. And instead of cutting individual pieces, we're going to add strips that are pieced as we go. So I'm taking all my strips, and you can see I've chain stitched. I pulled my fabrics into 3 basic colorways somewhere in here, and I chain stitched them all together. Here you can kind of see what I did along the way, and I just pieced them into 3 long strips. And then at the beginning of every strip, I put one of the short pieces. Remember, I cut, when I was cutting these, I cut one from the entire pile of, I think there's 24 fat quarters. And so the ones that I didn't use for this block, I'm putting at the beginning of my other strips. And I'm holding this over here for that. The idea being that I'm taking my short pieces first. Remember, I cut these into 8 inches, and then these for larger, because as I go around this block, it's going to get longer and longer and longer with every round that I make. And so I wanted to keep the short ones here, so it's not just one continuous fabric all the way around. This way, I'll get a little more variety in my fabrics. So I did it first with the short ones, and then I'm going to come back and do the same thing with the long pieces. And like I said, I divided them into 3 colors so that I'll have 3 strips to work from. Because if I'm going from here to here, I may not want to then come back around and go from here to here. I may want to come on the other side of this strip, or, you know, I can do whatever I want. It gives me flexibility, and that's the important part, because if we have flexibility, we can really get creative and do some fun things. So let me go ahead and get started here. I'm going to work the first few rounds with this and show you how that looks. And then once I'm done with these, I'll work on this. But the other thing I'm going to do, because these are all very saturated colors, is they're not deep dark colors, but they all have, each fabric has quite a bit of color in it, as opposed to these, which mostly have the white or the creamy backgrounds. So I am going to put those in sporadically throughout. I'm not exactly sure how that's going to work until I get there. Do you ever find that you start a plan and you sort of have an idea, but you kind of wing it as you go? That's okay, because that's how some really fun ideas come about, when you let yourself just kind of go with the flow and see what happens. Well, that's where we are today. So we are going to get scrappy with our stash, and we are going to put together a beautiful quilt block. I can't wait to see it. Oh, and did I mention 1 quilt block? Ooh, that gets interesting. Before I got too far along, I wanted to show you the first step, and that is to put these pieces on the side and then put the next row in. But I wanted to show you first is, as I'm adding these strips, let me get these little threads out of the way while I see them, I let them overhang a little bit so I can come back and trim. And that I'm going to do on the first few rounds as I go. Now, you can see what I did here is I took, let's see, this one. I used this strip here, and then I just cut that off when I get to that point, so I'll use this at another time, and the same here. So what I'm doing is, slowly, this is going to get smaller, and then these pieces will sort of sporadically create seams around, and the color is going to break in different areas instead of consistently being in the center of each square. And I kind of like the look of that. So that's where I'm going with this. Right now what I'm going to do is press this really good, trim off these ends, and then I'll continue using these 3 strips until I'm out of them, and go around in circles. And then I think I'm going to put a row or 2 of these white background pieces in. That'll kind of break it up. So I wanted the heavier colors here, and then we'll put some white background, and then we'll go into more colors as well. So that's where I'm heading. I'll be back in a few minutes and show you where we are. I completed my second round, and I'm just going to trim this and make sure my measurements are where they should be. And I want to make sure when I trim this, I'm cutting, or I'm measuring the entire strip and not just a section, because you can easily get yourself twisted and not be exactly straight. So if I do it this way and I make sure that these lines run along the seam, then I know I'm getting a good square cut. Now, let's turn around and do this side. The other thing that I'll want to do is measure my block, and I do that in the beginning just to make sure that I'm on track, because once I get moving out wider and wider and the block gets bigger and the strips longer, then I want to make sure that I am keeping things square. And I find as long as I keep it square in the beginning and keep things, sort of lined up the way they should be, that everything comes out pretty darn well. So here we are. Now, this measures 8.5. This should measure 12.5. So I have 5/10, and if I press that, there's my 12.5, and 5/10, and there's my 12.5. So we're doing pretty darn well. Now, a couple ideas, and this is the part where I have fun, just mixing things up, because one thing I can do now is bring this block here. I'm not going to worry about trying to match it up, but I kind of like the idea of that fabric coming around the edge. Alternatively, let's see, where are my other strips? Here's one of them. Let's see, which one? This one right here. So I'm going to do these next two sides. This would be kind of fun, because then this sort of continues that color and it doesn't look like it's left hanging. So I think what I'll do is put that one here. And I have a third strip somewhere. I think I lost it along the way. It's probably by the ironing board. And maybe just put that here. But I don't want that seam to line up. I'm going to take it like this so those seams are off. I got to be careful though. I don't want these seams to line up, just because it makes it easier if it doesn't. Although, when I come around this way, I shouldn't have a problem. See, I keep thinking that I'm doing individual blocks. And when you do that, you don't want these seams to fall in the same places, because the block next to it's going to be a problem. But I don't have to worry about that, because I'm just using long strips. So there's more freedom for me. I can do whatever I want. And if I want to match these up here, I can do that, and it's going to work beautifully. Okay, so this is my first row. Then I'll come back when I find my other strip and put the next row on and see how that goes. All right, we're getting there. Do you see how fast this block builds, though? Every row adds 4 inches, and that adds up fast. Okay, here we go. I've completed 3 rounds, and we're up to 16 inches, actually 16.5 with our seam allowance, and I love the look. So you see, even though not everything is at the 4.5 inch, we're still getting that potato chip look, that scrappy strip look that we really like. And I have a couple extra pieces left over, and they're not quite long enough. So what I'm going to do is, after I do my rows of the light fabric over here, I'm going to add these to the next round of the dark fabrics. And I'll take these little pieces that were left over from these strips, and I'm going to piece them right in. So it just gets scrappier and scrappier as we go. And now I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to divide this into 2 piles. And the reason I do that is so not everything is exactly the same. So that I don't have my fabrics in the same order going around. And then I can switch and come back with a reverse. I can flip my strip around. Let's see, I kind of want to go keep the turquoise here and keep some of this here. And we'll put these together like this. And I will add this to the front here, I think would be kind of, no, these big prints will go here on this one, and then these will have the smaller prints. And so I'm going to save these few to go on the other piece over there. And I think we'll be good here. I'm just going to put, let's see, I've got the full one here. I'll put one right here. And which one? So this is going to go on this end. Like that. Okay, so I will get these sewn together, and I'm going to start putting them around the edge, and we're going to get some contrast with that low volume fabric. And then when we put the darks around, it's really going to add a lot of interest. So what I want you to see is just how quick and easy this is, because we don't have to cut all the individual squares. We're cutting 2.5 inch strips, and we do start with those 4.5 inch lengths in the middle. But then we just start adding and adding and adding. And then as we, take the pieces we trim off and incorporate them in there, it just makes it scrappier. And you get some fun little pops of color all over. So I think this is going to look really awesome. All right, I'm going to get the whole part of the low volume in, and then I'll be back when that's finished. check this out. I have 1, 2, 3 rows of my darker fabrics, and then I have 3 rows of the light, and I really like that contrast. And now when I get around the edges, oh my gosh, it's going to be beautiful. So this is 8, 2, 4, let's see, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 2, 4, 6, 8. So this is 28 inches square. And if I'm going to add 3 more rows at 4 inches is 12, is 30, 40. So this is going to be at least 40 inches once I get that done. And that's kind of a nice baby quilt. I may do that because I think this is a lot of fun and it's going to finish off great. I really think we're keeping the integrity of the look of a potato chip block, even though we're kind of cheating here and using the longer strips on the outer edges, but we still get that same effect. We get that same look. And oh my goodness, this is so much faster because we're not doing all that cutting. It cuts the sewing down fast and easy. Here you go. And here's a quick look. We're all finished. And I have my center block right here. And then 1, 2, 3 of my dark rows, 3 of the lights, and I have 4. I decided to go with the 4th one. Had I stopped here, that was 40 inches. This takes me up to 44 inches, which I really like. As a matter of fact, I had a lot more strips left over than I thought I would. So I have enough to do a 5th row, and I think I'm really going to like that because that outer row will be deeper, it'll be wider, and I think it's really going to create a nice frame for the entire quilt. But I love how this turned out. I'm going to get a photo of the entire quilt. I just obviously couldn't lay it out here. But just the way all the fabrics work together and the colors are mixed in, and putting in some of these smaller squares throughout gives you that feel of the potato chip block. And blending colors, I think, works well. And contrast, I mean, you can do just about anything. And this, of course, is a leftover piece. So just piece it as you go, and it looks wonderful. You're going to get that potato chip block look. I think this is awesome. What an incredibly fun layout for scrappy strips. I think this is fantastic. Starting out with the traditional potato chip block really kind of sets the tone for the quilt, and those smaller pieces get a lot of color involved. And then as we go out and we're stretching those strips out and making them a little bit longer, we still get the scrappy look and keep some of them small in between, because then you get that consistency throughout the quilt. Now, this light trio of strips looks really awesome. I think that's fantastic. Don't you like how that white background really stands out against the color? And then bring out these 4 rows. I'm definitely going to add that 5th one. Now that I've seen how this looks, I think that extra row out here is going to be beautiful. Oh my goodness, this turned out great. And what an easy way to make a potato chip block. Definitely we took some modifications on this potato chip block, but we're still getting the same effect. It's scrappy, we have the rectangles, it's pieced together, and I love it. I think it's beautiful. I hope you enjoyed this too and have some great ideas. If you want to stay to the regular potato chip block size and fill this in with lots of little ones, you can certainly do that too. Either way, it's going to look beautiful, and I think this is such a fun idea. Taking a block and, modifying it a little bit, making it simpler, easier, quicker. It's always a fun way to go. Well, now you have some choices to make. How are you going to make your next potato chip block? The fun of it is going to be deciding which way to go. So pull out lots of fabrics and start thinking about what you're going to do next. Thanks so much for being here with me. As always, it is a pleasure to have you. And Neva, thank you again for this fabric. It is awesome.